Hi everyone, welcome to 2022. I thought in this video I would run through my biggest lessons and insights that I've gained from 2021 and the reflection process that I went through so that I can know what I need to change and, more importantly, how I plan on changing these things in 2022, because I feel like when you actually make when you gain an insight and then you also create a plan for acting on that insight, then things are going to shift and change. So the process that I go through each year is Andy Drish's Perfect Life Vision. So I've been doing the same one since 2017, so I'll leave the link to that in the comments below. And essentially it's a 3-step process where you reflect on the past, take an inventory of the now, and then create a vision for the future. I found that one of the most powerful parts of this process, which for some reason I haven't noticed before, was to go through the reflection process. So really taking stock of what I learned from the previous year and then how I want to shift and integrate that into my forthcoming year. One of the first insights that I gained from 2021 is that I seem to always want to go out to eat food and go to restaurants and go to coffee shops and go to bars and go to pubs and consume and enjoy meals out basically. And when I reflected back on 2021, I realized that none of those times where I was going and doing those things were particularly memorable. Much coffee. Look at all those options of coffee. There were only 1 or 2 that were, and when I think about the amount of money that I spent on going out to coffee shops and restaurants and pubs and bars, I don't think the corresponding payback has actually been worth it. And when I reflected deeper on that, I feel like when I do go out to those places, it tends to be because I'm procrastinating, or suddenly something is kind of hard in the day and I'm like, oh, I'll just go out for a coffee. And it makes me feel like I'm being productive because I can be like, oh, I'll work in the coffee shop, but then I don't really tend to. I tend to just sit there and drink coffee. How I plan on changing this in 2022, if I feel like I have a sudden impulse on a random Tuesday at 11:30 in the morning to just, oh, I'm gonna go out for coffee, to ask myself, what am I running away from? What am I supposed to be doing right now? What is the real thing that's actually the hard thing on my plate? Like filming these kind of videos for YouTube that I'm procrastinating or putting off because there's some kind of deeper resistance that's coming up that's making me want to procrastinate and just do something different and distract myself basically. And converse to all of that, I noticed that the most memorable times when I went out for meals in 2021 was when I was celebrating something, when I was somewhere new and it was exciting and I felt, you know, let's go and explore this bar, or let's go and explore this pub, or, you know, we were in this new environment and it was just fun to go and see something new and taste new things. So I feel like I'm going to save up and reward myself, I suppose, or notice when I'm going to be in those spaces so that I can then choose to go out and have a meal or have something to eat or have a coffee, because those seem to be the environments where, oh, I had a really nice time there, I'm remembering we did this, we did that. The second thing that I learned from 2021 is that most of my pain is emotional. When I feel down in the week, it's often when I tell myself that I'm going to be committing to something and then I don't, so I almost break trust with myself. So to change that in 2022, I'm going to be focusing more on discipline. Now, previously, with the whole awakening goddess and all of this like feminine revival, I was like, okay, I'm going to be devoted and be devoted to myself. And honestly, at least for now, devotion doesn't seem to work for me. I just don't do the thing. I make excuses. I think it's probably tied to certain intimacy things, like pains that I'm still working through, that devotion feels a little bit too emotional and close, that I tend to make excuses to not do things. Whereas when I'm disciplined, but in a slightly different way to how I've been before, where I'm kindly disciplined with myself rather than previously when I'm disciplined to the point of bulldozing. So I plan on bringing in this kind of kindly discipline for myself going into 2022. And I'll be sharing in a minute with the kind of things that I plan on using that for when I'm going to be disciplined with myself to achieve certain things in this forthcoming year. The third thing that I felt like I learned from 2021 was that of all of the Zoom calls that I felt like I did in the whole of the year, the most memorable, the most lovely were ceremonial Zooms. So they had an element of ceremony to them. They were moved through in a ceremonial way, often having some kind of shamanic or spiritual element to them. And every other Zoom, when I've joined a course or any other kind of experience, hasn't been very memorable. So going into 2022, I'm going to be very mindful of, if I'm paying to enter into an experience, does it have a ceremonial element? Is it the kind of ceremonial element that I seem to enjoy? And leaning in more to those kind of online experiences. Alongside that, if I see a course or I see an advertisement or I see someone's offering something in 2022 and I'm feeling excited because I want to buy it, I'm going to ask myself, okay, does this look like it has a ceremonial element? Because if it doesn't, then I might think twice if it's something that I want to sign up for. The next thing that I learned from 2021 is that I seem to get smaller and smaller energetically when I feel like I'm not doing the things that create money in my business. So I tend to not want to go out, I tend to not want to go, I don't plan holidays, and it's almost like this catch-22 of getting smaller and smaller and doing less and less and making less and less money and getting smaller. It's like this vicious circle that kind of leads into constriction. I plan to be really disciplined with the kinds of things that I feel like help build my business in 2022, so that I don't enter into a vicious downward spiral with constriction and making myself smaller. The fifth thing that I learned from 2021 is that I really enjoy a good book. It was when I visited my friend in Wales. We went to a really cute bookshop and I bought a book called The Seven Sisters, and I got so into it. It was just traveling to Brazil and it was so romantic and passionate, and there was just all of these amazing sights and different drama that was happening, and I just felt so engrossed in that story and so excited and just really positive when I was reading that book. And I went on to then read another couple in the series after finishing that book, and I've now literally got like all of them so I'm working my way through them. So I feel like at all times going into 2022, I want to always have some kind of novel on the go, particularly one that has adventure or magic or travel, romance, something in it that just feels really light and fun. I think in previous years, I've read a lot of non-fiction and kind of spiritual books and things like that. And those are really good and they're useful and helpful, but you go a bit more into study mode with those. And I find with novels, you immerse and your imagination goes and your creativity gets sparked and just uplifts you. So in 2022, I plan on reading plenty of novels. In 2020 and for the earlier part of 2021, I was listening to so many business podcasts. I was listening to James Wedmore and George Bryan, Joe Polish. Joe Polish has an amazing podcast, and I really got immersed and was just listening to so much. I was honestly finding that it was more helpful and beneficial than a lot of paid programs that I've been in around business. Towards the earlier part of 2021, I felt like I had a real lack of knowledge around storytelling and how I can integrate that into speaking with my clients and in my content and in different ways in my business. So I started listening to You Are a Storyteller, and I started listening to Andy J. Pizza's Creative Pep Talk podcast. And I just loved it so much. There was this particular podcast for Andy J. Pizza where he gets you to do this creativity reflection, where you go back and you look at all of the movies and films and books and artists and dancers and all these different types of influences that have really sparked and crafted your own creativity, and you look for themes and what kinds of truths there are for you and how your creative expression comes out. And I found that so helpful, so opening, so inspiring. It really kind of put a fire under me to want to create. And I feel like I really want to take more of that into 2022. I'm at the point with listening to marketing and business where I feel like there's very little more that I hear that I feel like is new information. Sometimes I get little nuggets or little pops of inspiration that come out, but for the most part I feel like I know a lot of what's out there. And obviously there's always plenty more to learn, and I'm open to that. But for this year in particular, I really want to continue that thread of activating my creativity and seeing if I can integrate that in with the marketing and the business piece, to really give a bit of a multi-dimensional 360 view of my own creativity and how it wants to show in business and marketing. And also when it comes to business and marketing, when I was listening to them in 2021, I would tend to go really, really deep with one particular person, whereas the year before I was doing a lot of like flitting around with lots of different people. Whereas this year I've pretty much mostly only been listening to Alex Hormozy, who has an amazing YouTube channel, and he's got like an amazing book as well called $100 Million Offers, which I highly recommend. I'll put the link to that below as well. So I pretty much just listen to him and his wife, and that's like all I've been listening to in 2021. So I feel like I want to continue going deeper in maybe for each quarter, maybe I'm going to just focus and listen to one particular marketing person, maybe even half a year, we'll see. And then so that I don't flit and get distracted, and there's a kind of simplicity to the marketing content that I'm consuming. The seventh thing that I learned from 2021 is that I so much more prefer in person to Zoom. I know Zoom sort of served its purpose into all of 2020, a lot of the early part of 2021, but I am so over it and I'm ready for more in-person stuff. So I signed up for another 3 years with my Shamanic Training. I've just finished 3 years, and we meet in person every like few months down in Glastonbury in England, and it's just so nice to sit in a circle, to be with people, to hug people, to just actually be going out in nature together, like just being human beings together basically, not on a Zoom call. So I'm really looking forward to focusing on that and continuing with just that as my main investment, I suppose, for 2022. So that's how I plan on changing it to 2022, is to sort of cut down my spending on these kind of online courses and different things that have these online Zoom elements. If I do, they're going to be ceremonial, and when I don't, they are going to be in person. So for those of you who don't know, for the first half of the year, we were living, me and Mike, my husband, were living in like a really cute little cottage in the middle of the Yorkshire Dales, which is like this really countryside place in like the north of England. And we'd been there for like 4 years. And whilst it was very pretty, it was very isolated. And one of the major downsides of that house is that it was extremely damp. It was just so wet in that house. Like we had the dehumidifier on all the time. There was constantly mold and everything. I was throwing out food all the time because it was just so moldy because of all of the wet and damp in the house. So I've really come to appreciate, now that we're here in a nice warm and dry place, that I really need my environment to be dry and warm to feel happy, because I just noticed that everything around me while I was in that space just took on this negative, heavy tint, because everything was just wet and damp and just kind of miserable. So that's what I plan on doing into 2022, is just to be very, very mindful that my environment plays a really big role in my well-being, and particularly whether it's warm and dry. I know it sounds really simple, but for some reason I never really thought about that before until I was in a situation where everything was just freaking wet. So that's what I'm going to just be mindful of as I go into 2022, and frankly beyond 2022, hopefully for the rest of my life. Okay, so the ninth thing that I learned from 2021 is that I love connecting with Earth. There were so many memorable moments of when I was out in nature, just really recalibrating, grounding, anchoring, bringing my energy back home. And I honestly, when I reflect back on those few instances that were really, really powerful for me, maybe like 3 or 4. So there was one particular one where I went swimming in this place called Lumhall Falls, and it was in autumn, but it was just so grounding. I literally felt so awake afterwards and just recalibrated. There was another time where I woke up one day, I think it might be before my moon cycle, and I was literally like, I need to go and find a cave. So I just went, I was googling like near us, where is there a cave? And I found this, like, it wasn't even a particularly big cave, but it had water flowing out of it, and it was just like raining and mossy and earthy. And I just sat in front of that cave for like maybe 10 minutes. It wasn't even that much because it was cold, and it just totally recalibrated me for, I feel like, almost months afterwards. So for me, there's so much power in connecting with Mother Earth, to the point that it feels like I've literally had like 100 coaching sessions just for like 10 minutes of being in a particular intimate space with Earth. So I really want to make more space to be out in nature in really intentional ways into 2022, because it just makes me so much more productive, it makes me so much more grounded, it just elevates my well-being so much, it inspires me. I don't know why I don't do it more. It's one of those things like, you know that it helps you, so why are you not doing it? So that's what I plan on doing more of into 2022. And how I hope to do that is to perhaps take one day a week where I go off on my own, without the dog, without Mike, and I just go and find a space to just go and sit and be with Earth, so that I can just get myself together, piece myself together. The 10th thing that I learned is that I need to wake up earlier. Basically for most of 2021, I was waking up at maybe 9 o'clock, sometimes 10 o'clock, occasionally 8 o'clock. Like I was all over the place. I'm often going to bed at 1 in the morning, waking up feeling tired, just sleeping really not, like just a completely random schedule. And then what I found is that when I did wake up, I didn't really have time to do my morning routine, so I'd often start rushing and cut it out. And then because I cut out my morning routine, like meditating and doing any exercise and just reading and just kind of coming into my senses, basically, the whole day just felt totally thrown off. And if I did do the morning routine, it ended up not really being a morning routine, it ended up being more of a brunch time routine. So then I ended up just starting work at 1 o'clock, and then I have to take the dog out, and then before I knew it, it was like literally time to stop working, and I'd only done like 1 hour of work. So a huge thing that I'm going to be changing, really working hard to change this year, and I stuck to it so far, is waking up at least at 6:30, so that I can do all of my meditating, reading, cup of tea, like exercise, just get all of the journaling, just getting everything done so I feel set up and ready for the day. And often that's when some of my best ideas for my business come through anyway, so I'm actually making space for that as well. Literally, I have an alarm that goes off on my phone at 9 p.m. now, and it says go to bed, and it just like keeps flashing, so that whatever I'm doing, like I just usually watching TV, like I just stop and then I just start getting ready for bed. I'm hoping with this discipline, doing it in a kind way, that it will help me just kind of get up very naturally anyway, earlier in the morning. Okay, so the 11th thing that I learned from 2021 is that I basically just don't do any exercise if I've got some kind of injury. So now when I feel like I'm getting an injury into 2022, my first thing to do is to prioritize physio and helping it actually get better so I can return to doing some exercise. The 12th thing I've realized, the insight that I had from 2021, is that emotions and food are very, very intertwined for me. What I noticed is that when I'm sitting meditating in the morning, I'm literally thinking about pancakes. I'm like, pancakes, lots of pancakes. Hang on, no, back to breath. Oh yeah, but maybe I could have some maple syrup. No, hang on, stop thinking about food. So literally I'm sitting there for like an hour, half an hour to an hour, just thinking about food, and then like trying to think about my breath. So this, for me, I don't know how I'm going to really unwrap this too much at this point, other than to just be very, very mindful of that, to see if I can go into that witness state where I'm noticing that I'm having those thoughts, but I'm not getting intertwined in them, and then taking action so that I go and eat. It's almost like when things get a little bit too hard, or I'm starting to face something in meditation, my body's like, eat, have something to eat. This will make you forget, don't worry about it. So I just really want to be mindful of that, so that I don't just act on the impulse going into 2022, because obviously it's not good for my health. It's just gonna make me gain weight. Doesn't feel good that I can't control my thoughts around it. So just working to unravel that and see what kind of shadow things going on there that I can work through. The 13th thing that I learned from 2021 is that I didn't really prioritize my friends last year. I got really embroiled with kind of myself, just really being introspective, and also my business. So I feel like this year I want to do more little things for my friends, like sending notes and cards and just like calling them a bit more frequently. I find that as an entrepreneur, that aspect can kind of fall by the wayside quite easily with all the other things, you know, between family and doing work. It just seems to be like for me anyway, seems to be the one that kind of like falls to the wayside. I don't put as much attention on it. So this year I want to be more conscious about spending time, energy and intention on building my friendships. The 14th thing that I learned from 2021 is that unless I have punctuated events that happen every couple of months throughout the year, I find that the whole year just blends into a bit of a murky mess, and I just don't really remember anything about it in any meaningful way. So it's almost like I need to have anchor points where, oh, I went to this place, or I had that thing on that weekend in June, and then, oh, in August this happens. So these kind of big punctuating events kind of seem to bring structure to my year and help me feel like it's been like a full year for me. Last year, for point 15, I played so many video games. I played so many hours of The Last of Us. Like I was just playing The Last of Us 2, just over and over again. I was also playing Assassin's Creed Odyssey. I think I spent like 150 hours playing Assassin's Creed Odyssey. And there's so much of that game is just so repetitive, and you're doing like the same thing over and over again. Like you don't even need to listen to the dialogue, because you're just doing the same thing over and over again, to the point that I wouldn't say that it became an addiction, but it definitely became a way for me to numb out a little bit. When I was just feeling stressed, I would just go for a video game and just like put it on for hours, like literally till 1 in the morning. And when I reflected back on the whole year, it just felt like kind of a massive waste of time, to be quite honest, because it's not memorable. It hasn't really changed my life in any way. The only thing that I felt like was worth it was the first playthrough of The Last of Us 2. All the other playthroughs I just didn't need to do. So into 2022, I'm going to actually try and maybe not completely cut out video games, but certainly to like massively cut down on them. And if I am going to be playing them, I would like them to be those kind of mindless ones where I can put on a podcast or an audiobook or something in the background, so that because I find that when I'm doing that, I go into quite a relaxed state, but I'm also like learning and consuming and like broadening my mind at the same time. So that's how I plan on engaging with video games for 2022. The 16th insight that I drew from 2021 is that I do remember moments of burnout in my business, like particularly after launches. But actually, on the whole, when I think of posting day by day by day, you know, like just going on social media and writing a post or sharing something, I don't really remember the trauma of that. My brain tells me, oh my God, all this visibility, or sharing this is vulnerable, like in the moment, and it's just like sending me into this like massive spiral. But when I was reflecting back, I was like, I don't remember any of that at all. It's just, all I remember is maybe weeks of just being silent, where I just maybe went into some kind of fear spiral and I didn't want to post anything, or feeling burnt out and I was just like, I just don't want to post anything. So something that I feel like, for me, that was almost like super insightful and quite helpful, because it makes me feel like in the moment, as I'm going into 2022, where I'm feeling all this resistance, and I'm like, oh no, people are going to judge you, or you know, you're going to burn out, and you know, all this self-talk happens inside my head. I'm like, well, at the end of 2021, I didn't remember any of that. So likelihood is in 2022, I'm not going to remember any of it. So I might as well just post the thing and build my business and build my creativity. Seems worth it to me. So that's something that I'm remembering moment by moment in 2022 to help me encourage my creativity as I'm sharing and posting and like sharing content and things. The 17th thing that I learned from 2021 is that there seems to be 3 pillars that help me achieve anything in almost any other category when it comes to visioning and life and creation. And that's emotional well-being, physical well-being, and financial well-being. If those 3 aspects of my life don't feel in alignment, so if I'm feeling emotionally depleted, I'm feeling like I'm going into like some kind of shame or darkness, if I stop exercising, if I'm eating really badly, and often because all of these are connected, if those 2 are happening, then I stop doing the things that I know are going to help me in business. I don't have the energy for it. So then like the money that's incoming starts to deplete. Those 3 aspects, if I don't prioritize them, then everything else basically becomes terrible. So I don't focus on my friends, I don't really want to see my family, I don't want to go anywhere, I don't want to create anything. just like all the other things that I could put, like philanthropy, like I just don't care. All of it just seems to go out the window. So, and this is part of the discipline of waking up early so that I can actually prioritize meditating and exercising and doing all those different things, that for the rest of the day I'm actually more likely to be in a better space so that I can create the things that create the money and create the things and do the things that help the emotional and the physical well-being, so that all the other categories of my life actually can have a better chance of being uplifted, and for me actually putting focus on them. The 18th thing that I learned from 2021 is that the raw bulk amount of money that I have in the bank seems to do less for my anxiety than having a stream of money being created and coming in on a regular basis, which is kind of interesting. So to my mind, it's almost as if I could have like millions in the bank, and that would almost do nothing as long as I had just like some money like coming in on repeat month by month by month. So going into 2022, I'm going to focus on what can I do to create greater vitality and blood flow in my business. So as I mentioned earlier, I was in the countryside, like proper out of that countryside for like 4 years. And then it was only into the halfway through the year that we moved back to Leeds, which is a sort of bigger city in the north. And that's been an interesting juxtaposition of having like being out in the country to being in the city. And I've kind of come to realize that now that I've been in the city for a while, there's a lot of things that I don't need that the city gives, like massive department stores and all these things that I literally never go to the city centre, almost ever, just don't care. Whereas there were a lot of things in the country that I was missing, like just having cute little coffee shops or little places that I could go, just having a little centre where there were shops and maybe a market and different things, but I don't need like all of the things, like all of the bars and the clubs and all of the crazy things that like the cities have. So I feel like if I could find a place over time that has the best of both, then I'm just going to be mindful of that and on the lookout for that. Maybe not into 2022, but just kind of starting to adjust my vibrations so that I'm kind of calling that in perhaps for 2023 and beyond. It also invites me to start looking around when I'm out on day trips for the kind of place that makes me feel that best of both feeling. Best of the city, best of the country. So I'll be gathering data on this going into 2023 for where I want to root myself down into the future. 2021 was the year of comfort YouTube for me. Honestly, I was spending so much time on Malama Life and Darling Desi, Morgan Long. I've literally watched so many of their videos, just so relaxing, so calming. Also the Cottage Fairy, just doing very simple things, living simple lives and learning about minimalism and wabi-sabi and like just aesthetics and different things that just feel very slow and almost girly, maybe, I don't know. Just it's been quite a big thing that's been comforting to me for 2021. It's almost a thing that makes me want to be involved more in the YouTube community, because I just feel like YouTube creators are, it feels like a very creative space to me that's quite unlike every other space. So going into 2022, I want to be watching more of them and also drawing inspiration from different places and different creators on YouTube for building this channel for you. I reflected back on 2021 around who were the people that I most enjoyed working with and how I most enjoyed working with them. And I really started to see some patterns that will adjust how I hope and plan on working with my clients going into 2022. You know, I really like not meeting like loads of times, you know, like I know I used to meet with clients like once a week, pretty much every week, which just wouldn't allow for when my period would come and I would just be drained or I'd have to cancel or move things around. Then it was kind of like once every 10 days and I still kind of do that, but I feel like my favorite meeting point is around every 2 weeks, because there's just this spaciousness to it. Often the work that we're doing is really deep and there needs to be time to integrate. And I've also realized that I like having the hour and a half, like these longer sessions where I can really go deep and be present with the person I'm working with. So there are little things like that that I've learned, and also the clients that I've really loved, others that I weren't as enthusiastic about, just starting to feel the kind of topics we spoke about and the tones and the things that they bring, the things that I seem to bring, has been very reflective. And for me, it's a real invitation to continue experimenting and gathering data on what I feel like best works for me and how I want to build and create and work and scale in my business. And it's kind of a real invitation out of perfectionism and into experimentation for me, which I plan to take forward into 2022 and adjusting how I work with people to reflect what seems to really work for me and my energy levels and what best creates best results for the people that I'm working with as well. And the final reflection point 2022, ironically enough, is that I got a huge amount this year when I was doing Andy Drish's vision process here out of the reflection process. Like I spent that most of last year, most of 2021, visioning what do I want, what am I creating, where am I going next, plan, you know, like I'm sure many of us have had this where we're just like wanting to know what's next, or like how do we do it, or like, you know, all these kind of things. And actually just sitting down for one day and reflecting what has worked and what didn't work before, and then using that to translate into this list so that I can actually plan my future was so much easier, more tangible, more useful, more practical, like applicable than any kind of sitting down and visioning process I've done for a really long time. So what I plan on doing into 2022 is building in reflective points throughout at the end of each week, at the end of each month, and then at the end of each quarter, and then like a quarterly planning for my business and also just generally for my life, because I feel like, why have I never done this before? Seriously, it just seems so obvious, but also I guess we're just creatures that want to keep looking forward, whereas actually all of the gems, all of the things that we've been through is in looking back and actually drawing those lessons through so we can adjust our behavior into the future. Because if you don't know what worked and what didn't work, how are you going to know? Then you're just continually guessing. So that's a huge learning that I've taken from this process, and I would really invite you to try out the Andy Drish's process. It's been really, really helpful for me, and I hope that you got a lot out of this video, and there will be more to come in 2022.